What do fill us in on the details and the reaction that you've gotten to this story.
Basically, there was a group of art students that I came across. Somebody had sent me a lead on a story, and I wasn't quite sure about it. I got the New York Times article and looked into it, and apparently these art students were a part of the Lower Manhatten Cultural Arts Program. Now, the Lower Manhattan Cultural Arts Program was on floors 90 and 91 in World Trade Center Tower 1. But this Israeli art student, I think some people got a little misconception about what I was reporting. It was an innocent art stunt, yada, yada, yada. But as I dug a little bit deeper, one of the art students who was a part of the Lower Manhattan Cultural Arts Program, there was 15 involved in the Bee Thing stunt for Gelitin, which is the name of that prank that I showed the photos of, the art prank that they removed a window and wheeled a deck out. One of those art students, his name is Hanan Serfaty. Now, that gentleman was in the Lower Manhattan Cultural Arts Program. I don't know if he was there that day, but he did. He was a part of the Lower Manhattan Cultural Arts Program. If you go back to the Lower Manhattan Cultural Arts Program, the list of a lot of those guys is not there anymore. The DEA original arresting report shows this information. Why the Lower Manhattan Cultural Arts Program doesn't show this anymore is a mystery to me, but the DEA report shows it, that he was a member of that program. Well, that's interesting because he's an Israeli military intelligence officer who rented 2 Hollywood apartments close to the mail drop and apartment of Muhammad Atta while he was in Los Angeles at the very same time.
Now, wait a minute. This is the guy Hanan Serfaty, who's part of the Lower Manhattan Cultural Arts Program that allowed these guys to set up and do their stunt in the tower.
Right. Correct. Okay. And this man, Hanan Serfaty, was carrying bank slips showing more than $100,000 deposited from December 2000 through the first quarter of 2001. Other bank slips showed withdrawals for about $80,000 during the same period. Serfaty's apartment, serving as cash pad, was also for at least 2 other art students who were located, I'm not going to give out the addresses, but I have those addresses, where allegedly lead hijacker Muhammad Atta's mail drop was. And they were also, both Atta and Marwan al-Shehi, were renting an apartment 2 blocks away from Hanan Serfaty when he was in Florida at the very same time.
What a coincidence. They just keep bumping into each other.
Right. And so DEA agents, and the reason why they found all this out, by the way, was because they were tracing these guys a part of an Israeli art student spy program. There was about 140 to 200 Israeli art students that were penetrating military bases. If you watch my film Core Corruption, I show the report. These guys penetrated DEA, IRS, Pentagon, military bases, you name it, and the ATF. And they did it because they claimed to be art brokers and art students. They would walk around with art portfolios and say, hey, I've got to deliver this. It's a very expensive art. Yeah. Somehow they made it past security, and they were walking around the halls of the Pentagon. And they ended up penetrating the entire United States security. And the DEA report found all this out because they were tracking an ecstasy trafficking ring. They were tracking drug runners. And drug runners were staying ahead of them by their phone calls, switching, and their stuff like that. And when they came across the fact that these guys were ex-Israeli military and they were spying, and they were certain of this, the investigation was put into a top-secret compartmentalized report, and the DEA raided an Irvington apartment in Texas, and Hanan Serfaty was down there in Texas as a part of this Israeli spy ring. Is a huge connection, because this specific spy ring was following the cells in 9/11. This specific spy ring was on 9/11 with vans packed with explosives. This specific spy ring was caught trying to blow up a nuclear reactor in Pennsylvania. They were caught surveying the Sears Tower. There was speculation by Chicago PD they were trying to blow up the Sears Tower. That report got buried. If people search hard enough, they'll find these reports. This is a very weird connection to have.
It certainly is. And this was one of the first 9/11 truth kinds of stories to develop back in 2001. Justin Raimondo of antiwar.com was all over the Israeli art student story. And then suddenly, he, a young, healthy guy, he had a mysterious heart attack, and he hasn't talked much about it ever since. We also had Carl Cameron of Fox News, and of course you have his clips in Core of Corruption. And there's a really interesting story by Christopher Ketchum, who's he's pretty much a mainstream journalist, who wrote a piece for Salon.com about this Israeli spy ring of pseudo-art students connected to the 9/11 hijackers. And he quoted a high-level intelligence source as saying that there are people in the FBI and the U.S. intelligence services who are really trying to get this information out. They're going to great lengths to try to get it out, but they're patriots. But the problem, he says, is that patriots are dead. And that's a direct quote from this Christopher Ketchum article. So this information was out there in 2001, 2002, but it wasn't being noticed very much by the mainstream.
Right, and there's something I want to mention here. Hanan Serfaty, living blocks away from suspected hijackers on 9/11, according to the official story. The reason why that's interesting is because, remember, September 21st, 2001, CNN reported that FBI Director Robert Mueller acknowledged that some of those behind the attack may have stolen the identification of the people they believed to be the hijackers. Now, the reason why that's interesting is because what if Hanan Serfaty, living blocks away from where allegedly Otto was in Florida and where he allegedly was in L.A., now it looks a little interesting. Because remember, none of these guys' names show up on flight manifest. A lot of people talk about stolen identification and leaving intentional paper trails, like that passport that was suddenly found, that supposedly was found on the streets of New York. The bags that were allegedly left that forgot to make the flight. A paper trail. They're leaving a trail of evidence, right? I think that there's CIA involvement. And when you go to McDonald's in Canada or if you go to McDonald's in the U.S., are you going to two different McDonald's? No, because it's an international corporation. This is how the intelligence apparatus works for the Western establishment. If you go to Britain, their front offices are called MI5. You go to U.S., their front offices are called CIA. You go to Israel, their front offices are called the Mossad. Does that mean that they're different agencies? Yes, they can be compartmentalized and operate differently, but the controllers of that agency are international. The behavior is international because if you look at 60-year period of Cold War, who supplied the arms in Iran-Contra? Well, the Israelis. But who trained the Contras? Well, a bunch of CIA operatives in the Southern Crescent from Texas to Florida. But that's my point, is that there's joint operations because it's all a part of the same apparatus. The entire
let me stop you here, though. Webster Tarpley in the first hour was pointing out that right now the British financiers and the intelligence apparatus that they're involved with is attacking the U.S. dollar as well as other currencies with the rather crazy hope that the pound will be the last currency standing. That would just be one example, if it's true, of the way that these intelligence agencies can, at times, work against each other on behalf of their national interests. So just like other mafias, mafias sometimes work together and sometimes they get into a gang war, right?
Compartmentalized, yeah. If I was the CEO of a big company and I had 100 departments underneath me, those departments are going to be working separately from each other. But as the CEO, I have the ability to pull one department and another department and another department and start an operation with these three departments. And all the other departments still working separately don't know. And that's how an intelligence operation is done. And when you're high enough up in the system, you can actually pull somebody from MI5, somebody from Mossad, and somebody from the CIA at your own leisure and use them in a separate operation, in a black operation. Does that mean that those agencies are all working together? No, they're still separately. But the controllers have the ability to utilize anything at their dispense. And remember, ISI and GID was set up by the CIA and MI5. So seeing their involvement in 9/11 actually really points still to the same Zionist empire. And that's a more accurate term because if you look at the Western establishment, you have Christians, Protestants, and Jews, and Satanists and other people that actually make up primarily the Western establishment. That empire has one intelligence apparatus. Yes, it's departmentalized and it has separate entities in each nation, and it operates that way, but the controllers at the top have the ability to pull people from anyone in any nation that they control into a separate operation. And 9/11 has every single sign pointing to that establishment, that Western establishment, which would suggest that the people behind 9/11 are from that establishment and nowhere else, which means we should stop looking in the Middle East and start looking upwards and upstream into our own establishment in the private sector and in government sector, maybe big defense contractors, maybe black operations, maybe military, maybe, banking families. We don't know. But up at the top there, they have the ability. So.
Indeed. Look up, not out. And maybe if we look up at who's really ruling us, we will be motivated to make some changes, because those folks ruling us are not good people, and they don't have our interests at heart. I'm Kevin Barrett, talking right now with Jonathan Elenoff of coreofcorruption.com, and we'll be back for one more segment. You can